Welcome to No Apologies on Beck, where we are unafraid to speak the truth. I am your host, Rick Becker, our co-host, Lori Hintz.
Hello there.
We've got an interesting
Yes, we
night
do. It's
planned.
kind of a different thing that we have planned for later on, a point-counterpoint issue, so that'll be something
Article
new.
5 of the Constitution.
Something we've never done before.
Yes.
And we got a brain food, too.
Brain food.
But
I'm going to knock your socks off with brain food.
I'm a little worried. I'm
Last
not going to
night,
lie. You frighten me
scared you.
sometimes.
I
Yeah.
I know.
So to start, we have some actual breaking news for you. So this is a brand new story. That's what the way you told me.
It's an ongoing story that continues to break. So here's my thing. It has to do with the state lab and it has to do with COVID. And I've just had such a problem communicating with the state lab. And there have been a lot of concerns. Constituents have brought up concerns. And I don't know if it's the manner of communication. I don't know if they are intentionally not being transparent or if they're selectively being transparent so they can claim transparency. I'm concerned that they have been cutting corners, perhaps, to do what is expected from them, from the governor or from someone higher up. And so here it follows like this. A lot of the concerns we were having with COVID and COVID testing had to do with PCR tests, right? Polymerase chain reaction tests. And you hear about this cycling. We covered it very early on in our show. But there's an aspect. So polymerase chain reaction test looks to see if there's a little bit of RNA from the COVID virus in your system. And you cycle it, essentially you multiply it, you amplify it. So increasing the cycles, it amplifies, and it's sort of exponential. And you get to a point where it's amplified so much that you recognize that the likelihood that you are actually spitting virus and being infectious is extremely low. And you get up to a higher point as far as number of cycles, where you get to a point where even the manufacturers are saying, the test is no good after this.
Right.
So then the question was posed from numerous people to the lab, what's the cycle threshold? In other words, what is that number you're coming up to?
I know other states, it was 42. I mean, it was really high.
Yeah, well, and it was for North Dakota as well. But the thing is that we couldn't get an answer. The answer was, look at the package insert for the machines. Well, that's not helpful. And so I had multiple emails and finally a Zoom sort of face-to-face call with Christy Masson, who's in charge of the lab there, and with Joshua Wynn, who's sort of the COVID czar for Governor Burgum, and he's also dean of the medical school. So I had them on. He's not going
to be called the COVID czar, just so you know.
And the problem was, we spent the entire phone call trying, just me asking, what's the threshold that you're reaching?
And because, never getting an answer?
Well, so you can. If you're an expert in a field, you can choose to be helpful, or you can choose to sort of force the person to have to pull teeth, knowing what they want, but not willing to give it to them unless they ask just the right way. And so that's what it was like, was pulling teeth. And it turns out that it was based on manufacturer guidelines, but then the question is, were the guidelines that cutoff number? That there's a good study from Canada that said whatever that cutoff, that threshold cutoff was, it should be less than that. Substantially, or the test could have an excess number of false positives. Okay, so trying to work through all that was just a bear. Okay, then we find out that there were a number of questions of runs. So you have a run of positives. And you would expect that the positives, like positive, negative, negative, positive, positive, negative, 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 positive, negative.
It wouldn't be all positive, positive, positive.
What they were having was clusters of positive runs, and those clusters were with a specific type of machine, Thermo Fisher.
Okay.
So then I inquired about that, and I'm told, oh, no, there's nothing there. There was this one issue, not a big deal, we took care of it. And then I find a memo, I think it was November 28th, asterisks, like, from now on, if you have a cluster, if you have a positive percentage of greater than 15%, do this. If it's greater than 25%, you cannot run it. You have to notify a manager. It's like, so then I emailed saying, what was the purpose of this? If there hasn't been a problem, you wouldn't have needed to have an alert go out immediately to all of the staff.
Right.
Then I find out from someone working in the lab, and you see all this builds, right? Because of a lack of transparency, because of a lack of interest in being helpful.
Right.
Then I find out someone who was working in the lab part-time is saying there's something funny going on. My understanding is a lot of the people that are running the extractions, the DNA extractions for the PCR tests, are not licensed. And the thing is, you're supposed to be licensed in North Dakota. North Dakota is a state that requires the lab techs to be licensed. And this is a very technical test.
Okay.
And that said persons who are not licensed were on the Thermo Fisher machines, which are the machines that had the runs, right? And so does A lead to B lead to C? Maybe it does. Don't know if there's proof of that, but certainly there's some reason for suspicion. And because you can't get straight answers, because you can't get forthrightness, then you're left to just wonder what the heck is going on. So let's pull up an email. This is an email from someone who contacted me, and they are talking with someone who is from the College of American Pathologists as far as the lab accreditation program. Pull up the next graphic, and you can see that they indicate to her all clinical testing, which includes all components of testing that may impact the quality of the test result, including isolation or extraction of nucleic acids, must be performed by licensed clinical laboratory personnel. Okay, and with that being said, the laboratory is not meeting compliance by having unlicensed personnel performing extractions of nucleic acid for COVID testing. Very interesting. Let's go to the next one. Now, the North Dakota has within its own policies there a violation. If you are practicing any of these tests without a license, you're breaking the law. And this is actually a Class B misdemeanor, if you can believe that. So, very interestingly, this is hearsay, right? But I'm still going to reference it. The indication is that there was a question from Altru Lab in Grand Forks. Apparently, people knew that North Dakota lab were running the tests with unlicensed technicians. So Altru Lab called CAP, where we just saw that email from, saying, hey, can we also run these tests without licensed personnel?
Oh boy.
Because it's difficult. You know, the state ramped it up so much there weren't enough. Right. Now you could hire nurses to do it. Nurses are exempted from this, but they cost more.
Right.
So then the question is, did Doug Burgum put on so much pressure for his testing that he was just bound and determined we must have #1 testing in the entire country? Did they shortcut? Did they cut corners and hire unlicensed people who were not supposed to be running these tests at all? And if so, did that contribute to problems in the lab with people possibly getting false positives?
False positives.
These types of things have to be asked.
Right.
Okay, go to the next graphic. Now this comes from North Dakota, the
Public Health Department.
Public Health, yeah, the lab. And so there's a memo. So the thing is that once they got word that CAP had gotten word from Altru in Grand Forks,
that they wanted to know if they could use unlicensed
the jig was
people,
up,
right?
The
Then
jig,
it's like,
and
wait
they're
a
like,
minute.
oh, okay, we're caught with our pants down.
Right.
What are we going to do? So here's what they say. They say the regulations did not specifically address whether the process of sample extraction is considered part of the pre-analytical or analytical phase of the test, the factor that dictates what level of credentials are needed to be performed. It was discussed at a March 25th meeting. I saw the minutes from that, and it was brought up. But basically, it's kind of like, hey, we all know what's needed here, but it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, and that's exactly what happened. Go to the next graphic. It says non-licensed laboratory assistants who are trained and competent performed extractions on the Thermo Fisher platform. Now that's contrary to what some of the emails that I received where there was very little training, especially when they let the people go who were unlicensed and suddenly demanded that the licensed people who hadn't been working on those machines suddenly jump up and take over without any training. Go to the next graphic. On December 10th, 2020, the state CLIA director received an email from Bridget Widener from NDDOH, Division of Health, reporting CLIA viewed extraction as part of the analytical phase. The laboratory took immediate action and stopped using non-licensed laboratory assistants for the extraction process, which completely fits the exact timeline for the people who work in the lab that have been in contact with me.
Wow.
So what it comes down to is we have a question of the transparency and veracity of what's going on in the state lab. We have a bigger question of whether they believed, whether they were told directly or not, whether they believed they were expected to cut corners from the governor's office. And I find that unacceptable. I'm not sure we're going to get any straight answers, but it's important for viewers to be aware of this.
This is what you call investigative journalism, right here.
Maybe
100%.
so.
No, 100%.
Maybe so.
That was well
All
done.
right, next up.
Okay, next up we're going to talk Article 5 Convention. So we'll give you a couple of different views of that, starting next.
Capital City Restaurant Supply is your one-stop shop for quality restaurant products for the large to small kitchens. Commercial-grade restaurant and bar supplies, limb game processing equipment, refrigeration, dinnerware, and smallware. We sell everything including the kitchen sink from trusted manufacturers for the chef and all of us. Open to the public since 1971, we are veteran-owned and North Dakota proud. Let us take care of your restaurant and home kitchen needs today by visiting us at 1414 Interstate Loop in Bismarck or on the web at capitalcityrestaurantsupply.com.
Heroes and Icons is now Cozy TV. Don't worry, you'll still get your favorite Beck News programming without changing the channel. Real people, real news, Beck News.
Hi, I'm Dennis Haugen, along with my sons Andy and Mike, and we're showing our support for wind energy in North Dakota.
Wind energy has provided farmers like us with a steady stream of income that's not tied to the weather like crops and cattle are.
Another bonus is that wind farm owners are required to maintain the roads leading up to the turbines. Because of that, oftentimes these roads are the best in the county. Wind energy is good for landowners, it's good for the land, it's good for our economy, and it's good for North Dakota.
Are you a thrill seeker, sightseer, or day tripper? The Ford Bronco Sport SUV is built for you. Fort Bears Casino is giving away a 2021 Ford Bronco Sport loaded with a ton of interior space, safari-style roof, smooth suspension for any terrain, and easy-to-clean surfaces. Qualify now just by playing your favorite slots at Fort Bears Casino. Double points on Sundays. Also get in on Super Senior Wednesdays, slot turning Thursdays, and hot seats on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Spin into Fort Bears Casino and Lodge for chances to win.
Some things in life are hard. That's why banking shouldn't be. Cornerstone Bank.
Welcome back to No Apologies on Beck. We are going to start one of two segments right now about Article 5, the Article 5 Convention. Article 5 is in the Constitution, and it refers to the method by which the Constitution may be amended. We have with us constitutional scholar Robert Brown. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I guess for our viewers, help set the table here a little bit.
Sure.
Article 5.
Big topic, what's it about?
Exactly, exactly.
In the U.S. Constitution, Article 5, that is the section where we can make changes to the Constitution. And there are two ways outlined in Article 5. The first one is the only one we've ever used. Congress proposes amendments, they go out to the states for ratification. The second route is known as the Article 5 Convention, when 2/3 of the states' legislatures apply to Congress for a convention. Congress calls a convention, the convention then proposes amendments, they get sent out to the states for ratification. So that's the general topic.
Yep.
And across the country, there are a number of different groups that feel like maybe right now is a time to use it, maybe make some changes to the Constitution, various amendments being suggested that could be proposed at the convention, and other groups, including myself, saying, I'm not so sure that's a great idea, especially in today's political environment. And so I'm in town today, coming up for tomorrow a hearing, inviting state legislators in North Dakota to repeal their applications to Congress for an Article 5 convention.
Yeah, I'm going to hold right there. We pull up a graphic, if you would. We're talking about Senate Concurrent Resolution 4004, and it is the rescission resolution, and it says that the 67th Legislative Assembly, that's us, rescinds all extant applications by the North Dakota Legislative Assembly to Congress to call convention to propose amendments to the United States Constitution under Article 5. So pretty basic. There's more to it, but I mean that's the gist of it.
That's the heart.
Because we have more than one right now out
Correct.
there. Okay. And what is out there so far in North Dakota? Are you familiar?
As far as the ones that are currently
Yes.
on the books?
Yes.
As I recall, there's one from an organization pushing for a balanced budget amendment, which, frankly, I support the idea of having a balanced budget at the federal level, as well as on my personal level and everything in between. But in addition to that, there's a second one from a group called Convention of States, and there's a little more broad. They have 3 just general topics that they're pushing for, one of which is term limits, one of which is just limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. Again, good conservative-sounding objectives, and frankly, the objectives that they're talking about, we kind of agree with. The method is where we differ.
Okay. Very good. So I guess the underlying premise is that you're concerned that it could be a runaway convention.
Yes.
So could you detail some of those concerns? And you're already aware, Robert, that we do, it's a little bit unfair to have a counterpoint, but the next segment is going to be a counterpoint.
Sure.
But I have every confidence that you know what the counterpoints are and you can address them ahead of time. So
Certainly.
So go forward.
The idea of a runaway convention is probably the biggest concern. Runaway meaning we called this convention for just a balanced budget amendment, for example. And while they're there, they decide to propose changes to other parts of the Constitution as well. And one of their counterpoints is it still has to be ratified, which is true. But in both of those, runaway convention and the ratification, there's really only one precedent that we can look to. We've only ever had one other national convention for amending our Constitution, which was when the current Constitution was created. The Convention of 1787 transitioned us from our first Constitution, which was known as the Articles of Confederation. Delegates went in there with certain instructions. They came out with a completely new document. And so with that, that's where I look to. That's really my main argument is, what does the history actually say? And there's a lot of debate on this, and I want to issue a formal challenge on the history.
Okay.
So I've given you a little bit of homework there, a little handout sheet, because, and this gets a little bit deep, and I'm going to keep it kind of simple for now, but just touch on the high points.
Yep.
In the 1787 convention, was it actually a runaway convention? And on the opposite side, they said the delegates were fully authorized to create a new constitution if they felt that's what was necessary. What did they think? The delegates themselves, did they believe that they were overstepping the bounds they were given by their states? And that's what I've given you there. There's 3 categories of possible answers to that question. In the convention of 1787, it came up numerous times. Do we have the authority to make these massive sweeping changes that are being proposed? The answer was, on the one hand, some of them said, we don't have the authority and we cannot proceed unless we go back to our states and get further authority granted. The second category, and this is people like Hamilton, Madison, and others, they said, you're right, we really don't have the authority, but it's urgent, we need to do it anyway. The third category was invented just a few years ago. It's what I'd call historical revisionism. And that is, we have full authority to do whatever we need to make the changes necessary to fix the Constitution. And the reason I say that's historical revisionism, and here's the challenge. Find for me one delegate from the 1787 convention who stood and said that. This was debated several times in the convention. Those 2 sides were represented. We don't have the authority, we shouldn't proceed. We don't have the authority, but we need to proceed. If they really did have the authority, do you think the delegates would have known it? Of course. Then why didn't any of them rise to say, we have the authority, let's look at our commissions right here, here's the authority to move forward? It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's the big concern. And then follow that up with the ratification. Constitutionally, today, we have a ratification process prescribed by the Constitution. In 1787, they did as well. In 1787, it was supposed to be every state legislature and Congress.
Yeah.
The convention changed it retroactively. They changed it to just 9 states, and it's not going to be the legislatures, it's going to be the people. So they lowered the bar for ratification. It never even went to Congress to be approved. Congress did receive it, and their vote was, we don't have the authority to approve this. They cut us out of the deal. And then ultimately, Richard Henry Lee, one of the members of Congress at the time, declared they decided to transmit it merely without approval or disapproval. Congress was out of the loop. They just passed it on to the states for ratification, and so on. So that's the precedent. Bringing us back to the simple overview now.
Okay. And
I
want to make sure, because it's so unfortunate, this should be, we should have an hour, not 10 minutes.
Easily.
But a couple of the things that I pose, and in full transparency, I was one of the delegates for North Dakota at the convention, mock convention of states.
The 2016.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things. One, Article 5 is in the Constitution because the framers wanted in the Constitution with the ability. So it's hard to say we love the Constitution, but not this one part. The second thing is, what about faithful delegate? Because North Dakota has legislation, faithful delegate, where if they try and do anything beyond what they're sent for, they're brought home, essentially.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a minute and a half.
Okay, a minute and a half. The first part was simply, because it's in the Constitution, yeah. And really, even Madison, in 1788, 1 year after they wrote the Constitution, he was already pushing against people using it. Wrote a letter to George Turberville, November 2nd, 1788, specifically saying a convention that would be called by 2/3 of the state legislatures was his concern. He said, I would tremble for the result of a second convention. In the present temper of America was his concern. And that's my concern as well. If we were in very different political times, it might be something I'm not so concerned about. But the other thing, your second question again, was
with regard to faithful delegate, yes.
That's right. And for that, the second half of the sheet I gave you shows historical precedent of legalities, the legal precedent. The 1787 convention set a precedent that conventions can ignore their commissions. And ever since then, in every state constitutional convention, they have upheld the idea that state legislatures have no authority to limit their delegates. I want you to look through that on your own time, because it's summed up in corpus juris secundum, where it says the convention delegates are the direct representatives of the people, not the states, and as such, their power may not in any respect be limited or constrained by the legislatures. So there's a long legal history ever since 1787 that the state legislatures have no authority to limit their delegates to constitutional conventions. They're a supreme authority because they represent the ultimate sovereign power of the people. And that's the last thing I want to end on is when the delegates in 1787 were debating, do we have the authority? Madison brought them together and said, we're no longer representing the state legislatures that sent us. We're going to represent the sovereign power of the people themselves. We're going to turn ratification over to the people, and they ultimately decide whether what we did is legitimate or not. By changing the ratification process, bypassing state legislatures, there was no limit of authority on what they could propose. They turned it over to the people themselves to decide.
Very good.
Excellent. I really do wish we had more time, because I would love to go into depth.
And we appreciate you
And
coming in.
I'd welcome doing it again.
Perfect. I think what it comes down to is just determining what your threshold is for accepting a risk, what that risk might be, and that's what it comes down to. But we are going to now be coming back next with a counterpoint. Hang with us.
Jeez, what a mess. Look at that. There's roof stuff everywhere. It's so embarrassing. Ruins the neighborhood. Come on, humans. Let's get this fixed.
Don't let your roof go to the dogs. Call America's Best Contractors for your free estimate.
Need a new woof?
After checking with the rest, go with the best. America's Best Contractors. 258-2412. Online at americasbestcontractorsincorporated.com.
In In southwestern and south central North Dakota, on any given day at any given moment, a Dakota Community Bank and Trust customer is logging in or signing on to do their online or mobile banking. We believe that community banking can blend both the past with down-home customer service in-house and the future with modern banking conveniences and technology for our customers anywhere, like here or here, all while honoring our long-standing tradition of community-first oriented banking here at Dakota Community Bank and Trust.
My wife was diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's. We talked about it and we kind of decided we'd be a little bit proactive and try to start making provisions. So we started looking here, and Eventide worked out to be pretty much the perfect answer. I guess I didn't expect it to be so nice. The staff here are terrific. We enjoy it.
Beck News brings you real people and real news. Every weekday on KNDB, KNDM, and KRDK. Start your evening with the Dr. Duke Show at 4. Take a fresh look at current events with Ladies of Another View at 4:30. Go down the road with Joel at 5:30. Watch No Apologies with Becker at 9. Cap off your night with No Filter with Debbie at 10. Beck News. Real people, real news.
The professionals at Superior Glass provide residential and commercial glass installation and repair services in central and western North Dakota. Superior Glass is your source for stained glass projects, mirrors, windows, touchless and automated entry solutions. Stop by and see us at 3323 East Broadway in Bismarck or call us at 701-258-5600. Superior Glass, where you get superior service for less. Bye for now.
Welcome back to No Apologies on Beck, your after-hours oasis of sanity. I am your host, Rick Becker, our co-host, Lori Hintz, and our guest at the moment is Representative Kim Koppelman, who is Speaker of the House and a past chairman of mine. Welcome, Representative Koppelman.
Good to be with you.
Congratulations, Speaker.
It's either that or sympathy. We'll find out as the session goes on.
I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, you have been a proponent of Article 5 amendments.
True.
And you have the advantage of following, being able to give counterpoint. I'm trying to be as fair as possible, but both you and Mr. Brown have gone through these arguments before, so I don't think anyone is, it's too unfair. The premise, and that I started, or I should say ended the last segment on, is really about what our threshold is of what we perceive as the risk of a runaway, because nobody wants a runaway.
Right.
Actually, possibly the extreme leftists would love a runaway.
Right.
But I think anyone in their right mind doesn't want a runaway. So it's the perceived risk of what that looks like when you have to not only get the amendment passed, but then bring it back to all the states enough to pass it, and whether the faithful delegate type of legislation would work. And you balance whatever that risk is. Is it a 10% chance? Is it a 1% chance? Is it a 1 in a million chance? And what I struggle with is balancing it with how rapidly we're losing our Constitution now. So is it effectively the same result as a runaway if we do nothing? And that's the struggle that I have. But Kim, I'd like to first hear your thoughts on it overall, and then we can dive in a little bit.
And out of respect, I'm going to try not to counterpoint specifically, but talk about the broader issues as your previous guest did, which I think is only fair. But I do want to talk about one thing that you just brought up, and that is that to assume that our Constitution is not regularly amended in effect, if not in fact, is a fallacy. And there's one body that does that all the time. It's called the U.S. Supreme Court. They issue a decision, and all of a sudden we say this is the law of the land, and they reinterpret our Constitution. That's a big problem. So, ironically, it's one of the U.S. Supreme Court justices years ago who first, I think, fanned the flames of the fear of a runaway convention by talking to a very prominent conservative person in America and said, you don't want this to ever happen. You don't want a runaway convention. Well, if you were the head of the group that did that regularly, in effect, you don't want anybody playing in your sandbox. So it's pretty understandable. I used to believe that a runaway convention was a real problem. I used to mouth those same words. We better not ever have a constitutional convention because, my goodness, it might run away. and wouldn't that be awful? Until I started to really study the issue and dig into it. And then I learned that it really is something that we should not shirk, we should not be afraid of. You made the point earlier, and I think it's a good one, and that is that most of the good people that I know, and there are a lot of good people who are afraid of a runaway convention, therefore they detest Article 5. They wish it was not part of the Constitution. And yet they call themselves constitutionalists. Well, I don't take the Constitution in bits and pieces. You either embrace it or you don't. And the key is Washington is out of control. The federal government is out of control. So the question is, do you trust Washington more than the states, more than your state legislatures, who, if you want to talk about partisanship or ideology, Republicans or conservatives are in control of far more state legislatures than the other party. And I don't trust much of what comes out of Washington, D.C. these days. So, and even George Mason at the Constitutional Convention said that it must be necessary for the states to be able to amend the Constitution without involving Congress, because it might be congressional misdeeds they're trying to rectify. Hence Article 5, giving the states the power to rein Congress in, to rein Washington in. And that's really what it's about. So the question of the runaway convention, what do we do about that? I don't poo-poo that objection or that concern, because I know people that hold it are very sincere and make some good points. So then I take a step back and say, okay, if the concern is a runaway convention, how can we prevent that? How can we build a firewall against that possibility? And most folks who do not like Article 5, who don't want it ever to be used, won't have that conversation because they simply don't want it to ever happen. And the fact of the matter is, at least 16 of the 27 amendments to the Constitution resulted from pressure from the states. Not always an Article 5 call, but some other kind of pressure from the states to do something, including the Bill of Rights. Now, I think it's a good idea that we have freedom of the press and freedom of religion and the right to keep and bear arms, and a lot of the things that we prize are in those first 10 amendments to the Constitution, not the original Constitution. And the states put the pressure on the federal government, on Congress, and Congress proposed the Bill of Rights. Had they not done it, I think history is pretty clear, the states would have done that.
Sure.
And the reason an Article 5 convention has never been held is because Congress watches what the states are doing, and as soon as they start clamoring, a requisite number, a critical mass, starts clamoring for a particular amendment, Congress says, here's your amendment, see if you can get it ratified, and sends it out to the states. So even an Article 5 process, many states passing Article 5 calls for various amendments for a convention, sometimes is nothing more, in Congress's view, than saber rattling to push them to the point where they will do something.
Right.
So, getting back to the question of if an Article 5 convention ever does occur, and it's not a con, it's not a constitutional convention, you hear that phrase many times. It's as Article 5 says, it's a convention of the states to propose amendments to the Constitution. I personally happen to favor a single amendment idea rather than a broad one like the Convention of the States. I did support the Convention of the States amendment, as you did. However, I prefer one like the Balanced Budget Amendment that simply says we're going to have a convention and limit it to this.
Right.
Ed Meese was Ronald Reagan's Attorney General years ago, and he had an idea. He said, what if we would just tweak Article 5 to the U.S. Constitution to clarify that what James Madison always believed could be done, it truly can be done. If there's any question, any doubt, that became an effort called the Madison Amendment years ago. And that was the idea. Let's strengthen this language to make it clear to everyone that we can do this. We can have a single subject convention of the states for a single amendment to the Constitution. Keep it from running away, keep it intact. Problem is the people that are afraid of an Article 5 convention were afraid of that because it in itself was a call for an Article 5 convention to do that. So then you take a step back and say, well, all right, if you don't like that solution, what other solutions might there be? That's where the faithful delegate law came from, to say that states could limit and control their delegates. They are sent to represent the states. The legislature can make a law saying if we ever have a convention of the states, an Article 5 convention, and we, North Dakota, send a delegate, we send Representative Becker to go represent us, if he gets wild and strays from the call of that convention, his credentials, he no longer represents North Dakota. His credentials under that law are immediately revoked, and he's immediately replaced with an alternate. So, the argument can be, well, you can break the law, I suppose, but I don't think a convention would sustain that. And there are other ideas. You can do a constitutional amendment in your state. saying that if a convention is ever held that runs away, the state of North Dakota will never be allowed to ratify the result of that convention. There's a current movement afoot to do it through an interstate compact, another area that I've been heavily involved in. As you know, I was the national chairman of the Council of State Governments a few years ago. So talk with people from other states about these things all the time. And there is a concern among state leaders and state legislators and state governments that Washington is out of control, that the only way it will ever get back into control is if the states do it. You know, because those who disagree with this say, well, the solution is sending good people to Washington. Well, how's that worked for the last 4 years?
Now,
Thanks for bringing that up.
One thing this faithful delegate to me seems to be a great fail-safe. However, like Mr. Brown said, and for those that are not in favor of this, if they could shirk those binds, then that makes it moot. But I wonder if you can shirk those responsibilities and the boundaries given to you by the state in this circumstance, can you also shirk those responsibilities when it comes to being an elector for the president? You know, once you leave the state to do a federal, and this isn't something I've given a lot of thought to, but it just occurred to me tonight, because I find it curious, and it'd be nice to know and you'd think we could find out the final answer. Are you bound by your state law that sent you there, or is everything off the table?
And I believe, you know, it's a good question, and I'm certainly willing to discuss it, and if there's a way we can strengthen it to ensure that that's not a problem, I'm happy to look at it. I don't think it would be a problem the way those laws are written right now, because again, the state would be sending a delegate. Likely in North Dakota, the way this would occur is if we've, as a legislature, issued a call for an Article 5 convention that comes to be, we, the legislature, then would send a delegate to represent the state. So that delegate, or those delegates, depending on how it's structured, would answer to those who sent them, the elected representatives of the people of North Dakota in that case.
Yep. Excellent.
Excellent.
Well, thank you very much, Kim. Pleasure having you on.
Yes,
appreciate it.
And we'll see if we can get you on again. Maybe you and Mr. Brown can have a head-to-head.
That'd be fun.
All
and
right.
a lot of other topics we could discuss, as you know.
As well.
Excellent. Hang with us. We are going to be back for some
Brain food.
Howdy folks, it's a Counterpoint Cafe. I reckon it's time you're due for a hearty meal. So saddle up for the day with one of our hay Boston breakfast homemade soups. Fill your grill at a salad bar, sink your teeth into our famous Counterpoint burger and barbecue ribs. Top it off with spoon rattling pie with a cum roll that's sure to put a smile on even the toughest outlaws. Shake the dirt off the boots each night and warm up with the gang. Tell them about it, Stacy.
I can't wait to see you at the county line.
Since opening in Hebron in 1940, Dakota Community Bank and Trust has been your hometown bank. Our mission has been to provide modern banking convenience with old-fashioned hometown service. We've grown with the communities we serve through year-round events, countless sponsorships, and nearly 7,000 hours of volunteering each year. Learn more about our 80-year history at dakotacommunitybank.com.
Jeez, what a mess. Look at that. There's roof stuff everywhere. It's so embarrassing. Ruins the neighborhood. Come on, humans. Let's get this fixed.
Don't let your roof go to the dogs. Call America's Best Contractors for your free estimate.
Need a new woof?
After checking with the rest, go with the best. America's Best Contractors. 258-2412. Online at americasbestcontractorsincorporated.com.
For the greatest selection and full menu offering is the Four Seasons Restaurant and Ice Cream Parlor in Garrison. Succulent sandwiches, big breakfasts served all day, and delicious desserts. Easy access in and out for campers and RVs. The Four Seasons Restaurant at the top of Main Street, Garrison.
Some things in life are hard. That's why banking shouldn't be. Cornerstone Bank.
Welcome back to No Apologies on Beck. It's time for brain food, nutrition for your noggin.
So we've got some interesting brain food today. My words
Nothing's
today.
going to top last night.
No.
If you didn't see last night's show, folks,
Go back and watch.
Go to the archive. You got to watch it. You've never heard so many
technical
terms for the genitalia in one
ever
show in your life.
In live TV. Yeah, it's got to love that stuff. I was over here going, okay, so these words today are a little more calm. These words that I have today have double meanings.
Okay.
So the first word that we're going to show on screen is the word cleave. Now this word cleave could mean a couple of different things. It can be a verb, or it can also be another kind of verb. It could be an intransitive verb, or it can be a transitive verb. So the deal is with cleave could mean to adhere firmly and closely or loyally or unwaveringly, to cleave to something. They kept themselves strictly separate, each cleaving to their own language, rituals, and food. So that's one kind of cleave. The other kind of cleave means to divide, just the opposite. If you divide something by cutting it with a blow, you cleave it in half. The blow cleaved the victim's skull. To subject to chemical cleavage is to a protein cleaved by an enzyme, so splitting essentially. So to split along the grain, this synonym for the second kind of cleave means to tear, rip, rend, split, and to move in half actually. So cleave can mean you can cleave to something and cling to it, or you can split it in half and it's the same word. Yeah.
Fascinating. Cleave.
Cleave.
Like cleft,
correct.
Split, or cleavage.
Or cleavage, correct.
Which is related to my number 2 piece of brain trivia. All right. So, mine. I brought a little play. We were talking yesterday about sex changes.
Right.
The surgical,
was our
right.
subject.
And so I got to thinking, hey, there's so much interesting stuff in the world of plastic surgery. Let's bring some of that into No Apologies. So, first one, we've got a cool graphic here. This is a picture, a drawing, probably a wood carving of some sort. Anyway, it is of a flap. So this gentleman lost the end of his nose, and the procedure was to lift up a flap of skin from his arm and sew it to his nose. And of course, that's not going to work if you move your arm, and so he was put into this whole apparatus to hold it in place. This was done by Gaspare Tagliacozzi.
On purpose, mind you.
Yes, and he was from Bologna. He was born in 1545.
Wow.
And he conceived of this idea. And we use that idea, not that flap, not
okay.
yeah.
All right, people are not with their arms up by their, okay, good.
The Tagliacozzi flap. No, we don't use that. But I've used similar flaps. So I remember I had a young gal lose all the skin of the front of her thumb from a rodeo accident. And kind of in the bra line, just out here, I lifted up a flap of skin and I sewed her thumb in, left it there for 10 days, and then I detached it from her chest, and then she had the skin. So that's what Gaspare was doing with the nose. Fascinating.
Wow. Very interesting stuff. I can't even imagine.
We do so much
Are you saying that she
beyond
had her thumb
across.
at that part across on her body
for 10 days?
For 10 days?
Just had her wrapped, yeah.
Oh, how interesting. I had no idea that was done. That's very interesting. All right, my second word today is another word with double meaning. This time, the word is temper. The word temper can be either a noun or a verb. So the noun, when you use temper, is the heat of mind or emotion, proneness to anger, passion, calmness of mind, temper, a state of feeling or a frame of mind at a particular time, usually dominated by a single strong emotion in somebody's disposition. And then the second version of temper, a verb, is, for instance, to dilute or qualify something. If you temper something, you moderate it. For instance, to harden a material, you temper steel. So 2 different versions, same word, spelled the same and everything.
Gotcha. Very interesting.
Okay.
All right, last one. My numero 2, dos, due, zwei, is, it has to do with cleavage.
Okay.
And bring up a graphic here. That's a breast implant.
Yes, it is.
Yes. #1 cosmetic procedure done in the United States.
Really?
Yep, and also #1 in my practice. There are about 300,000 cosmetic breast augmentations done every year.
Wow.
Yeah. Silicone is by far the most common. The silicone they have now is a good kind. It's called cohesive. You can cut the implant in two. It's not the runny stuff that was of the days of old.
Somewhat safer?
Yeah, definitely safer. There's a lot of stuff you see on the internet, which, you got to take some of that stuff, a lot of that stuff with a grain of salt. Right. But yeah, interestingly, you can still do saline, which is the implant filled with salt water, or you can do silicone. And I would say, I give the choice to all my patients. Last 300 breast augmentations I've done have all chosen silicone.
Interesting.
Because it lasts, it feels a little more natural. It's equally good in boosting someone's confidence and making them feel feminine and whatever other reasons they may have. Silicone is the way to go.
Interesting.
300,000 per year.
I didn't realize there were a couple of choices in there.
Oh yeah, and there's choices within that choice I could talk for hours.
I know we could. All right. Excellent stuff. All right. When we come back, we're going to hit a little more serious subject than cleavage and silicone when we come back.
Howdy folks, it's a Counterpoint Cafe. I reckon it's time you're due for a hearty meal. So saddle up for the day with one of our Hey Boss and Breakfast homemade soups. Fill your grill at our salad bar, sink your teeth into our famous Counterpoint burger and barbecue ribs. Top it off with spur rattling pie with a calm roll that's sure to put a smile on even the toughest outlaws. Shake the dirt off the boots each night and warm up with the gang. Tell them about it, Stacy.
I can't wait to see you at the county line.
Hi, I'm Dennis Haugen, along with my sons Andy and Mike, and we're showing our support for wind energy in North Dakota.
Wind energy has provided farmers like us with a steady stream of income that's not tied to the weather like crops and cattle are.
Another bonus is that wind farm owners are required to maintain the roads leading up to the turbines. Because of that, oftentimes these roads are the best in the county. Wind energy is good for landowners, it's good for the land, it's good for our economy, and it's good for North Dakota.
Capital City Restaurant Supply is your one-stop shop for quality restaurant products for the large to small kitchens. Commercial-grade restaurant and bar supplies, limb game processing equipment, refrigeration, dinnerware, and smallware. We sell everything including the kitchen sink from trusted manufacturers for the chef and all of us. Open to the public since 1971, we are veteran-owned and North Dakota proud. Let us take care of your restaurant and home kitchen needs today by visiting us at 1414 Interstate Loop in Bismarck or on the web at capitalcityrestaurantsupply.com.
My wife was diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's. We talked about it and we kind of decided we'd be a little bit proactive and try to start making provisions. So we started looking here, and Eventide worked out to be pretty much the perfect answer. I guess I didn't expect it to be so nice. The staff here are terrific. We enjoy it.
The professionals at Superior Glass provide residential and commercial glass installation and repair services in central and western North Dakota. Superior Glass is your source for stained glass projects, mirrors, windows, touchless and automated entry solutions. Stop by and see us at 3323 East Broadway in Bismarck or call us at 701-258-5600. Superior Glass, where you get superior service for less. Bye for now.
Now is the best time to plan for your 2021 farm equipment needs. North Dakota-based Summers Manufacturing is currently offering early order savings. Take advantage of big savings on North America's broadest tillage line, including the Super Kohler Samurai and the innovative VRT Renegade, as well as the best built, best backed land rollers in the industry. Talk to your Summers dealer today or go to summersmfg.com to learn more about early order savings available on all Summers equipment.
Welcome back to No Apologies on Beck, our final segment, segment 5. Lori's got an interesting situation with the courts.
Well, this story was sent to me by a friend, and I think it's just definitely of note. We've talked a little bit before about precedents and a little bit about federal court cases and things like that, but this one has a North Dakota twist to it. So what happened was a federal court blocked an Obamacare mandate that would compel doctors to perform gender assignment surgery. And an order of Catholic nuns then actually challenged the mandate under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, arguing that it forces doctors to violate their consciences and medical judgment. What you see on your screen now is the article from the Washington Free Beacon where I found this. And it says, absent an injunction, they will either be forced to violate their sincerely held religious beliefs by performing and covering gender transition procedures, or to incur severe monetary penalties for refusing to comply, District Court Judge Peter T. Welty wrote. Now, Peter T. Welty, we're going to get to in a moment, but an injunction will also advance the public interest because the protection of constitutional rights is always in the public interest, is what he said. Peter D. Welty is from North Dakota.
Excellent.
So this is from a North Dakota District Court judge who ruled last Tuesday. Now, what was last Tuesday? Last Tuesday was the day before the inauguration. And he ruled that nuns and other religious health care providers were harmed by the law. Lower courts have split on how, we'll get to this in a second, this next slide in a moment, but what I want to talk about is the fact that he sneaks this in literally under the wire. I love this so much. So the decision came hours, not days before, but hours before President Biden took the oath of office, and it could complicate some of the new president's health care agenda, because everybody knows that Biden is going to push this, and this week, of course, he's specifically said that right off the bat.
Yep.
So this was, I love the timing of this, and I love the fact that it was a North Dakota district judge that did it.
Yep. It's phenomenal. I don't understand why transgender rights, and here's something. I am opposed to, or let me say it differently, I do not support transgender rights.
Correct.
I do not support black rights. I do not support women rights. I do not support men rights. I support rights, and they are the same rights for everybody.
Everyone.
There is
Well
no
done.
such thing
100%.
as a specific special class of people's rights.
Yes, you are exactly right.
Everyone needs to be treated equally under the law.
As soon as you carve out that niche, what you are doing is you are giving somebody more rights than somebody else. And you're right, it should all be equal.
Right. And so what you've got is Biden jumping up there saying, for whatever reason, one of the centerpieces of his policy, his platform, is transgender rights. And what is he going to do except to use, I guess, the media, which is on his side, and by compulsion, force people to abide by what he says, use redistributive techniques of taxing the rich to ensure that it.
Yeah. I get frustrated with the fact that you are shamed for whatever you say too, because this should be a free market issue. There should even be no compulsion to do anything. It shouldn't even be in court, in my view, because if you have a free market, what's the problem? You should be able to do whatever you choose. The nuns should not be compelled to do something. Doctors have no business being compelled to do something that they don't want to do. How ridiculous is that?
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And especially when you, I mean, that goes for essentially anything.
Right.
But when you pick something as controversial as this, and I say controversial because we talked the other night, maybe it was last night, on some of these things and the problems concomitant or underlying mental health issues with transgenderism, the high rate of suicide, and to move that into a position where we are compelled to not only, I guess, tolerate it, but endorse it.
Right. And you know, your point is spot on too. We were talking about the suicide and the collateral damage of that. I mean, there are so many other things that happen in addition to the surgery afterwards, and nobody takes that into consideration. That's the part that is.
See, and it's different, and we can use the suicide statistics.
Right.
Transgenderism is different than homosexuality. As far as a mental health issue, and that's borne out by suicide statistics.
Self-harm, suicide.
Right, but it doesn't change the fact that everyone should still have the same rights. I don't care if you believe that you're a different gender than how you were born. I don't care if you believe you're a different color than how you were born, a different age than what you actually. Whatever you believe, that's up to you. I should not be compelled to pretend the same thing as what you're believing.
Or pay for it. That's my favorite part is, and we're going to compel you to pay for it now too. And on that same note, I just read today that our new president was going to open things up. Don't ask, don't tell is you know, in the military, all of a sudden it's going to be a free-for-all, men and women showering together and all sorts of things. You know, and I'm like,
I might join the Army.
there we go.
I'm sorry.
Just stopped me cold in my tracks again once again.
All right.
Anyway, so I think we have covered this, but it's an interesting thing to me because a precedent may be set now with a lower court, and now other courts may do the same.
It's excellent. I'm glad the timeliness of it to perhaps undercut something that was going to be a train barreling down at us, forcing us to comply, endorse, and pay for some of these things with which we disagree.
100%. Fantastic. All right. On tomorrow night's show, we will have another couple of guests for you. Or is it just one guest? I can't remember. We've had so many.
Who knows? It's somewhere between 0 and 5.
Right. Thankful. And also, we'll talk a little COVID. Join us next time.